citing a report produced by the Office of Election Crimes and Security in January, asserting that more than 100 representatives of the group attempting to pass a ballot measure to expand abortion rights in Florida committed crimes related to gathering petitions. Parsons Malika told the committee that the initiative process was broken and thus reforms were required. Here's the thing. As far as the signature gathering process, I mean, there are checks and balances that are already there. To be honest with you, we don't need somebody to investigate the crimes like that. I mean, we already have the checks and balances in place. This is really an overextension of state power to take away your democratic rights when it comes to direct democracy. And that's exactly what this is. They got spooked. They were freaking the F out. That Floridians said, whoa, 6-week abortion ban, that is too much. We need to push it, roll it back, baby. Roll it back to 24 weeks. So here in Florida, we have what is called a ballot initiative state, meaning that members of, the citizenry here in Florida can petition to get certain ballots on our elections for voters to vote on direct to creating new laws without having to go through the legislator, without having to go through the governor or municipalities. You can, with enough signatures, actually create new laws that Floridians can vote on. And so we just came out of an election this past November, and I actually did a series on the ballot, the amendments that were going to be on the ballot last year. Thanks, by the suggestion of Roger Meadows. I really appreciate it. And so I went over those, and some of the most important ones were the ones that people really didn't pay that much attention to, right? Like everybody paid attention to Amendment 3, right? Amendment 3 was the law that allowed for recreational use of marijuana. A huge focus was put on Amendment 4, which is why I have it in the thumbnail. Amendment 4, what that does is that it returns the cutoff for abortions back to 24 weeks, right? Because it's about the viability. Once the fetus is viable, then that's when abortions are considered illegal. So it returns it back to that because we're now at a six-week abortion ban. So with that being said, those were some of the most well-known ones. But one of the least known ones, I think, was Amendment 6. And that one was for state funding of elections, to repeal state funding of elections. A lot of people don't realize this, but our state elections can be publicly funded. And it doesn't matter what party or independent, as long as you drum up enough support, you can have state funding of the election, which I fully support, because I think that there should be I don't think we should have any money in politics at all. Campaigns should be funded by, tax dollars from, state funds. Absolutely. And so with that being said, that did not pass, which I'm grateful for, because we get to keep state funding of elections, and which we've had for quite some time now. And also, if this would have been repealed, this would have been repealed just in time for the 2026 gubernatorial election, which is, for all we know, it could be either Byron Donalds, or it could be Casey DeSantis, Ron DeSantis' wife, that's running on the Republican ticket for Florida governor. And whoever the Democrat is, I really don't care, because the Democrats are feckless anyway, right? But the issue is that Ron DeSantis and the Florida Republicans are actually attacking direct democracy. They're attacking the will of the people to be able to say and have a voice within our state. Well, let's get into it. It's going further. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you truly believe in the rights of Floridians, especially when it comes to our direct democracy, you need to pay very close attention to this. So out of Orlando Weekly, it says, bill making it harder for Florida citizens to put amendments on the ballot heads to House floor. Now, before I get into this, let me share something with you really quick. Back in 2018, we as Floridians voted to give voting rights back to formerly incarcerated felons or former felons in the state. We voted for that. Yes, a red state voted to give voting rights back to people who served their time and now they're citizens again. What did the Republican-led Florida legislature do? Not that the Democrats would do anything better, but right. But let's lay the blame where it belongs. They put a paywall in between people who are formerly incarcerated and being able to vote again. So you got to pay to vote. You got to pay back the fees and the levies that are put against you, the court costs and all that before you can get a vote. Essentially making it so that you actually have to pay to vote. Meaning that it's a class issue. Because if you have a felony and if you're affluent and if you can just pay those off, well, then you get your right to vote back. But if you're not, which is most of us, you don't get that say, which also means being able to vote on ballot measures too, which is also a class issue. And it also disproportionately affects a lot of Black people. So the Republican legislators saw that and saw how we were like, hey, we actually are okay with the formerly incarcerated being able to vote again. We also voted to give ourselves a $15 an hour minimum wage. And then after 2026, when it achieves $15 an hour, the minimum wage actually grows with adjustment to inflation. A red state voted for that. We barely missed on overturning the abortion ban. I'd say this, if Kamala Harris wasn't running and there was actually a Democrat that actually had better policies and they actually ran on something close to what Bernie Sanders did, I honestly think that more people would have came out and Amendment 3 and 4 would have passed because they barely lost. So number one, we would have recreational marijuana. Number two, the abortion ban would have been returned back to 24 weeks. Or is it 26 weeks? I think it's 26 weeks. And so, I'm sorry, it's 24 weeks, but it's the 6-week abortion ban. But anyways, the legislator was looking and they saw that when it comes to economics, the pro-worker, pro-social welfare mindset is actually more prevalent within Florida than people are willing to admit. Because ultimately, some conservatives, they look at the greed of corporations. They look at the problems that corporations and the wealthy do. And some of them, they're like, yeah, this isn't okay. And people deserve to be able to have a floor. And a lot of them, this is why sometimes it's easier for those of us who are socialists and communists to actually talk to conservatives because, in some ways, they get it. They get the system and how it is from an economic standpoint. They don't necessarily get it from a social standpoint. And and you have people who are fooled on both sides, both Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives. They're fooled. The voters, I mean, they're fooled, right? And so seeing that, and then seeing how these amendments barely eked out, is freaking the Republicans out, because that means that it's just a matter of time before we start to want to enact other policies. I guarantee you this: if a single payer healthcare system was made available to Floridians, and let's say hypothetically there was excitement in Florida, just like maybe a Barack Obama presidency, right? And the Democrats came out, right? And even some conservatives would vote for it. They would vote for a single payer healthcare system in Florida. They definitely would, because there's too many people who are suffering, and they don't want to suffer any longer. So, but this is the reason for the weakening of it. But let's get into the nuts and bolts of this, because the oligarchs are really behind these politicians. The blurb says an overwhelming number of public speakers denounced the bill, many claiming that the GOP controlled committee and legislators want to have that amendment process continue. So, it says Governor Ron DeSantis' goal to make it much more difficult for citizen-led constitutional amendments to pass in Florida is one step closer to happening after a House committee approved a measure that would add significant new hurdles for such initiatives. It says the bill, HB 1205, sponsored by Lee County Republican Jenna Parsons Malika, would make a series of changes to the state's already extensive initiative gathering process, which has been tightened over the past decade by the GOP-controlled legislature. It passed on Wednesday on a party line vote, more than 2 hours of sometimes intense reaction and public testimony. Citing a report produced by the Office of Election Crimes and Security in January, asserting that more than 100 representatives of the group attempting to pass a ballot measure to expand abortion rights in Florida committed crimes related to gathering petitions. Parsons Malika told the committee that the initiative process was broken and thus reforms were required. Here's the thing. As far as the signature gathering process, I mean, there are checks and balances that are already there. To be honest with you, we don't need somebody to investigate the crimes like that. I mean, we already have the checks and balances in place. This is really an overextension of state power to take away your democratic rights when it comes to direct democracy. And that's exactly what this is. They got spooked. They were freaking the F out. That Floridians said, whoa, 6-week abortion ban, that is too much. We need to push it, roll it back, baby. Roll it back to 24 weeks. At least let us roll it back to 24 weeks. Because you see what they did in other red states when it came to abortion rights, when it was done by direct ballot initiatives. See, this is the thing about people. We may have differing beliefs, but largely, a lot of us, we're more reasonable than people give us credit for when it comes to certain things. Now, you may not agree with abortion at all, right? And many people don't. Like, there's many people in my family who don't. But at the same time, you literally had people who were pro-life, who were Republican, that said, yeah, we understand, but you're overstepping your bounds and you're literally putting your hands in the uteruses of women and people with wombs in this state. People with uteruses. You're literally trying to control somebody with a body part. Now, I'm gonna say this right now. I would feel the same way if you try to dictate to me as a man what happens with my Franks and berries. I would have a problem with that. Because who are you to dictate to me what I do with my Franks and berries? Look, that's the issue, right? And what I do with mine, I can't tell what somebody does with theirs what to do, and it's not my business. If they want to, you know, do something with their kiwis and cucumbers, that's you, bro. And so, but the problem is that a lot of Republicans also felt the same way that, you know, those of us who are more socially on the left, they felt the same way as we did. Like, no, live and let live. Like, if you don't want to have one, don't have one. Let's return it back to the 24 weeks. This freaked them out. This freaked them out about the $15 an hour minimum wage, which the corporations don't like. This freaked them out about the felons being allowed, former felons being allowed to vote again. That freaked them out. So many different things that were freaking them out because the workers were voting for pro-worker issues. Now, let's continue on. It says, but the Democrats and the vast majority of those who spoke during the hearing were critical of the legislation, which they said would effectively kill the citizen-led amendment process. This is a quote from Anna Eskamani. Representative Anna Eskamani says, what this bill will do as currently written is make citizen-led initiative process impossible in the state of Florida unless you have billions to spend. You're creating a new administrative burdens under the guise of integrity that is really designed to restrict access and suppress the First Amendment rights of Floridians. Let's take this right here just for a second. This is a class issue. This is basically saying, if you want direct democracy, then you got to be rich to get it. Meaning that only the rich will be able, because they're going to say, oh, well, we still have direct democracy, but only the rich can access it. If you want I'll put it this way. If you want everybody to be able to access something, you'll put it at a level that they can all grab from. If you put it at a height too high for most of us to grab, then only the tall people will be able to grab it. Right? It's the same thing. You're putting a paywall to direct democracy. That's not democracy. Paywalling democracy is not democracy. Therefore, they are being deeply anti-democratic. You actually think Ron DeSantis is democratic in any way? And don't get me wrong, I got smoke for the Democrats because they're feckless in what they do. And they will set up things for the Republicans to knock down. They set them up for success. But I'm giving smoke to Republicans right now. They are not democratic. And they don't want you to have a say over what your state does. They want to silence you. Ron DeSantis and really the Florida GOP want you to just be drones. They want you to be complacent and compliant workers that don't speak up at all, that just do what you're told. Shut up and let us run the country. And it's all good if they're doing everything you want, but once you get another party in that does things that you don't want, then what? Now I see the wheels turning. I see it turning now as you watch this screen. This is why direct democracy is so important. this is really the last bastion of hope that we have before a revolution takes place, which I feel is inevitable because they're really trying to destroy our only means of actually controlling some levers of power. So let's continue. It says provision in the legislation includes requiring the petition to sponsor a post, a $1 million bond payable to Division of Elections once the sponsor has obtained a letter from the department confirming that 25% of the requisite number of signatures has been obtained. If a person who is collecting or handling initiative petitions is found not to be a U.S. citizen or is convicted of felony without having his right to vote restored, which is paywalled, by the way, the petition sponsor is liable for a $50,000 fine for each person. The bill revises the deadline by which petitions must be delivered by the petition sponsor to a supervisor of election from 30 days to 10 days and increases the fines from a $50 flat fee for each late petition form to a $50 for each day late for a total fine up to $2,500 per late petition form. If the sponsor or petition circulator acted willfully, the bill increases the penalty from $250 for each petition form to $2,500. The bill requires all petition circulators, volunteers, as well as paid staffers to be residents of Florida. It says that before the paid circular is registered, he or she must submit a criminal background check. Let me tell you right now, criminal background checks are going to be very, very difficult because how many people that you and I both know that have maybe gotten a ticket, an arrest, even though you weren't convicted, right? How many of us have been arrested for driving while black, sleeping while black, grilling while black, swimming while black? And that can come up in a criminal background check. So just because you may have gotten arrested or detained by officers, you now have a record. And if that comes up in a background check, well, the state legislator can go, nope, you can't be collecting positions. Do you see now? And people go, well, if you didn't do anything wrong. There's a lot of us that don't do anything wrong, and yet we're still harassed and oppressed by the goons from the bacon factory, the bacon bits that like to roam our streets. And so, are we going to allow this? How many of y'all got a record? Maybe you were young, you were drunk out in the middle of the street, you got taken in for public intoxication. You got that on your record, but you kind of wave it away at the back of your mind because you were 22 years old. You were near a college town. You were having some fun. You were publicly intoxicated. The police took you in for disorderly conduct. You got out the next day. You spent a little money on, you spent a little bit of money on bail, and you left that in the past. And now 20 years later, you're in your 40s, and then next thing you know, you want to, circulate on petition signing, and then they find that out, and then next thing you know, you get in trouble because of some public intoxication you had in your 20s. Your means to direct democracy has now been revoked. your means to help indirect democracy has now been revoked. You got to think about these things, y'all. You got to think about, right? It says the bill creates a signature revocation process that allows a voter to revoke his or her signature from a petition form. The supervisor of elections must post on their website the total number of signatures revoked every month and later every week. If the percentage rises to more than 10% of the total positions received during that period, the Office of Election Crimes and Security is required to conduct a preliminary investigation and may report findings to the statewide prosecutor or, if applicable, state attorney for prosecution. So, who's to say that somebody undercover may sign the petition and then revoke it on purpose just to get that number above 10%? People be like, JB, you're getting into conspiracy territory. Look, I trust a snake to be a snake. I trust a scammer to be a scammer. Why would you trust any one of these politicians with a system like this? I don't. Trust me, I know the type of things that they will pull. I'm a black man in America. You don't think I don't know? You better wise up and wake the up. Come on now. Anyway, intense debate. It says for nearly 2 hours, the overwhelming number of public speakers denounced the bill, many claiming the GOP control committee and legislators simply don't want to have the citizen-led amendment process continue. It says perhaps the most contentious piece of legislation is the provision that will reduce the time that the petition sponsor has to deliver a signed petition from 30 days to 10 days, with the fines increased for every day that they are not returned. It says the 10-day turnaround time that this bill puts on is unreasonable for the tens of thousands of petitions that citizen-led amendment sponsor needs to collect per week in order to qualify for the ballot. On top of that, with that 10-day turnaround, we end up with absolutely unreasonable per petition fines, even if they make a simple error. But Pinellas County Republican Linda Cheney said that the proposal was based on a fraud that she said was exposed in the 2024 petition gathering process for specific amendments that was listed in the Office of Election Crimes and Security report. She said the Department of State did an investigation. They printed a 939-page report, and this bill was based on the issues that were identified in that report. So it's a very fact-based bill. It says the bill will now move to the House, likely for passage. The Senate version is being pushed by the Senate Committee for Ethics and Elections, the SB 7016, that has one more committee stop before going to the floor for that chamber. So this is really Florida Republicans pushing to make sure that you are silenced. See, they're not going to do it outright. So they never do anything outright anymore, because what they want to do is that they just shut you up a little bit more. It's like stitching your mouth shut. They're not going to stitch it all shut at once, because then that means you're going to fight against it. You're going to do one stitch, then wait. Another stitch, then wait. Another stitch, then wait. And then your mouth becomes more and more closed. So you can't speak. We also call this thing death by 1,000 cuts, where they systematically take out a piece by piece so that you do not have that provision, you do not have that program, you do not have that public good. And so therefore, when it comes to you speaking your mind as a voter in the state of Florida, do you really have it? No, you have to go through the gatekeepers being the Florida politicians. You got to go through the Florida legislators, You got to go through the state reps. You got to go through the state senators in order to be able to actually get something passed. And they won't always go by what you want. You can't just look at the Democrats, especially the Democrats nationally, right? We'll tell them, hey, can you guys, force a floor vote for Medicare for all so that we can actually have single payer healthcare in this system? And then next thing you know, they're like, I don't want to hear. I'm not saying anything. Or they go, new phone, who this? Next thing you know, we didn't get it. Do you actually think they're going to capitulate to anything that we say on the state level either? No. Must be some child. Were you born tonight? I was born at night, but not last night. So this is just another example of the fecklessness of our politicians here in this country and how they really are anti-democratic. Meanwhile, little old communist me, I actually want you to have democracy even in the workplace. I want to expand it. This is why we have to change the system and start organizing from the ground up, people. If you live in Florida, keep your eyes peeled, because the thing is that we may not be able to speak on whatever our state does much longer, at least from that level, which means that we might have to start taking to the streets, at least just to organize and build through power. But with that being said, keep your head on a swivel. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.